for pizza. Okay, so we're going to talk about animal processing and harvesting. So, when animals reach full size, they're sent to a facility to be processed and prepared for human use. The Humane Methods of Livestock Slaughter Act in 1958 requires that all animals be rendered incapable of sensing pain prior to harvest. The only exceptions for this are kosher and halal animals, which remain conscious prior to being harvested. So, when it comes to preparing animals to be harvested, because we are required to render them unconscious first so that they don't feel pain, um, it is a two-step process. We use a stun gun. So this is basically injects a metal bolt between the animal's eyes so that it becomes brain dead. Here on the bottom right, you can see where each animal's consciousness, the conscious part of their brain, is at, and so that is where the bolt is placed. The reason that we do this is so that they are brain dead upon harvest. So this is, of course, not allowed for halal and kosher animals. Those are religious. Um, that's kind of, those are religious-based harvests. So, I'm not gonna argue with people's religious freedom. I personally prefer animals be stunned first. I think that it's more humane. But so then after we stun an animal, they're no longer capable of conscious thought, feelings, pain, anything. It's basically like getting a lobotomy. So the animal is then raised by its back legs using chains, and the aorta is cut with a knife, and then their blood is drained out of their body. That way, they are, dead, truly not just brain dead, but also, excuse me, physically dead before the harvesting process starts. So I know this isn't a fun subject for people to talk about, but it is an important part of understanding animal agriculture. So that's why we're going to be going over it. We're not going to go into super gory detail on some of this stuff, but I am going to give you the overall process. And there is a video that's optional for you to view at home, which actually goes through the entire process of cutting meat. And I find it to be incredibly um, interesting because I like to understand where all of the cuts come from, but I make it optional because I know not everybody likes to see that thing. So the animal, after it's been stunned, after its aorta has been cut and it is physically and brain dead, the animal is then sent through several other stations that clean it, remove the hide, and cut the muscle into the different portions. So this is the video that I was talking about that's optional. I highly recommend you watch it. I think it's really important to understand how food is processed, but again, it's not required just because I know that this is something that's more difficult for people. So I will post it as a link with that information. So poultry processing. Chickens are stunned either by passing the birds through a low voltage electric field or exposing them to high concentrations of carbon dioxide gas. So you can see the chambers down here where they're exposed to concentrated carbon dioxide gas. Pigs and poultry are briefly placed into a bath of boiling hot water immediately after they are killed. The reason that they do this is because they carry on their skin bacteria that leads to foodborne illnesses. Sorry, morning sickness is acting up a little. Um, this makes feather and hair removal much easier as well. Um, so pigs don't have a lot of hair, but they do have really coarse hair. And then of course poultry will have all those feathers, and feathers are all. Um, so euthanasia is the practice of intentionally ending a life to relieve pain and suffering. Poultry and livestock may be euthanized if they're very sick, lame, or otherwise unfit to be raised to slaughter weight. The legal requirements for euthanasia vary. Um, but ultimately, when we sorry, I shouldn't have switched the side yet. Ultimately, when we are talking about euthanasia, it's usually for the health and well-being of the animal. So maybe during transport, a cow or a steer broke its leg, we can no longer slaughter them if they come in and they are, they're injured and they're suffering. We are required, usually, depending on the state, but all states do have the base requirement if you're not allowed to harvest an animal that's severely injured, they have to be put down. And that's where euthanasia comes in. And generally, it is a series of medications that basically overdose and kill the animal, and then they're not allowed to be um, consumed after that point. So that, of course, makes it really important for livestock producers and transporters and handlers to keep animals safe because that's lost money, right? And of course, nobody wants to see an animal suffer. So health issues, intensive factory farming of animals has created a lot of secondary health effects in both the animals and humans. And so antibiotics are administered to animals in a large operation to reduce the amount of illness and maximize their growth rate. Here you can kind of see an example flyer from a chemicals division. So about 70 to 80% of the antibiotics manufactured in the US are used on animals in these type of conditions. Now, that being said, there's a withdrawal period required before animals are harvested so that antibiotics are not allowed to be present in the meat as residue. And it is illegal to harvest animals that have been given antibiotics within that withdrawal period. Every single antibiotic has a withdrawal period printed on its label, and it's illegal to lie about it. And there's random testing to ensure it. Now, I know that there's a lot of things. There's really big marketing gimmick in the animal sector where people will say that they don't use antibiotics ever on their farm. And I get why people would be attracted to that, but I'm going to show you the other side of that because antibiotics do have a place. Animals do get sick. Even in the healthiest non-CAFO situations, animals still get sick. And the way that we would treat a human being would be to give them antibiotics or some kind of pain reliever. When you get sick, generally speaking, you get treated for it, and animals they deserve the same treatment. So I am personally, this is one of the times in class where I'm going to give you my opinion on something. I am very much against anti-antibiotic movements because I think that it's inhumane to the animals. I don't think treating a sick animal is wrong. I think that operations that refuse to treat sick animals so that they can claim antibiotic free is bullshit because all meat is antibiotic free because of the withdrawal period. So to me, they're just farms that are mistreating animals. So I don't support anything with that kind of labeling. So some examples. Calves get sick on the range for various purposes, but most often due to stressors like temperature fluctuations, especially this time of year, when it's really cold at night, but then it warms up during the day, or when we have crazy temperature fluctuations this time of year. One week it's in the 30s, the next week it's in the 50s, the next week it's in the 70s. Um, those temperature fluctuations often cause calves to get sick. And we're not just talking about calves that are in concentrated animal feeding operations. This happens to calves that are out on grass. I mean, it's normal. We all get sick this time of year because of the temperature fluctuations, and animals are no different. They can get sick from the stress of weaning, from umbilical cord infections. Mother's milk may lack the appropriate antibodies. Maybe she has low colostrum. Some of the signs that we look for sick calves are droopy ears. You can see that in the bottom picture. Sunken eyes. They may be gaunt looking, meaning their sides are sucked in. Um, they may be panting, they may have a runny nose, they may be secluded from others and have a drooping head. They just look like they're sad and not feeling well. And I believe that the most humane thing would be to treat them with antibiotics. That is my personal. Other illnesses that require animals be treated for their well-being include mastitis, which is an infection of the udder, very common in milking cows. Pink eye, it's a bacteria that's carried on dust that gets in animals' eyes, and it causes an eye infection that can lead to blindness. Hoof rot is basically like their version of athlete's foot. Mange is lice. There's dermatitis outbreaks that are really common in swine. Ringworm is a type of fungus. Actually, humans get ringworm as well. Um, that makes it makes round blotches that are really itchy on your skin. Scours and diarrhea should be treated. So here's an image. I know these are kind of grisly, but here's an image of a cow with advanced pink eye. Here's an unfortunate case of a piglet that passed away due to porcine dermatitis and nephropathy syndrome. And here is an example of a dairy calf who needs to be dewormed because they have intestinal parasitism. So the other thing with the marketing gimmick, where people say that they don't use any medications on their livestock. So, you don't have to worry about there being anything in the meat. Well, that's BS. There's not going to be anything in the meat anyways because of the withdrawal period, and all you're doing is coming up with an excuse to not treat sick animals or give them dewormer, and I call BS on that. I think that that's an animal welfare issue, and that marketing gimmick needs to stop. So this is the only part of the class where I get a little fired up and I give my opinion. Okay, poultry illnesses. Most livestock are susceptible to coccidiosis. This is not just something. I hate Zoom so much. Not Zoom, sorry, PowerPoint. Like, just go to the dang next slide. It can run off into nearby water sources and produce a terrible. Okay, alternative animal agriculture. So we're going to learn some other marketing terms that are often very misleading, starting with cage-free. Cage-free means that animals are not kept in battery cages. Their confined pens may still be used. A lot of people think cage-free means that they are like free willy running in the countryside, living their life. They're actually still in confinement. They're just basically not kept in those tiny battery cages. Certified humane animals must be able to perform natural behaviors such as nesting. So that can still occur in a confined area. Free-range animals receive a certain minimum amount of outdoor access. So that doesn't mean that they're like out in a field grazing. It just means that there's space allowed outside of a confinement pen where they have a certain like amount of hours every day where they get to go outside. Organic means that the animals were raised with organic feed and not given antibiotics. Okay, so if you are buying organic meat, you're supporting the part of agriculture that does not take care of their animals when they're sick, and I'm just not a fan of that. Labels. Some meats are labeled as no hormones, but all meat is hormone-free. Vegetarian fed simply means that the animals are fed grains such as corn. Grass-fed beef and milk must be given free outdoor access during the growing season and may not be fed grain. So remember, the ultimate idea behind beef cattle is that we want them to have a lot of marbling. So the USDA shield is applied to steaks based on the amount of that marbling. Every single animal that's sold to market is graded on this scale. So USDA Prime is the most, has the most marbling. So over here on the left, this is the most expensive cut of meat. Over here on the right, Select has the least amount or has less marbling. It's going to be less tender and juicy, and it's going to be a more affordable cut because of that. This one in the middle, this is going to be choice. This is generally the most popular with consumers because it still has some marbling, and it's middle of the road in terms of its. So there is no legal definition of the natural or all natural designation in foods. So when you actually see foods being sold as natural or all natural, I would just like to bring it to your attention that there is, until they created the fake meat product this year, there is no fake food. So commercial pork, all natural pork, organic pork, and pastured pork can all be fed food that's natural because that's what we feed. Okay, so commercial pork is allowed to be fed GMOs and they do get treated if they're sick. All natural pork is allowed to be fed GMOs and they are permitted to be treated when they're sick. Organic pork can be fed corn and soy, generally GMO free, and they are not treated when they're sick. Pastured pork can be fed corn and soy and may be permitted to go outside during some portion of the day, and they are not treated when they're sick. Now, I will say that there is a significant number of new farms that are raising pastured animals that are also treated when they're sick, and that is what I prefer to support. So let's talk about animal production sustainability. I know I'm throwing a lot at you today. But the thing about animal science is there's so many things that we can discuss that I kind of have to kind of just keep them moving. All right. So again, we've talked at the beginning of this course about how animal production sustainability depends on your idea of sustainable. Anytime we talk about anything that's sustainable, your ideas of sustainable are going to influence ultimately what you think is the most sustainable. So, you know, it could be free range, it could be pasture raised, it could be small scale, which tends to be the most sustainable, to be honest. There's also combination operations. These are definitely the most stable. And what I mean by combination operations are these are operations that provide a combination of different animal units that they're selling. And that's what makes them stable. Let's say they sell pasture raised pork, they raise free range eggs, and they also have pasture raised lamb. You know, maybe this year the pork market doesn't do good, but they still have their eggs and their lamb to carry them through. And that's what ultimately makes them the most sustainable in terms of production sustainability. Locally raised cuts out fuel costs, so you won't be paying for transport. However, you are going to be paying probably more than you would if you went to the grocery store and purchased a capo raised animal, primarily because capos are designed to mass produce meat at a very inexpensive rate, whereas if you're supporting local agriculturalists, you're paying for somebody's family's health and well-being, not wealth. Ask any farmer, they're not wealthy. So you may be paying a little bit more per pound because they're not mass producing, so they can't cut price by flooding the market basically. But ultimately, it tends to be more sustainable in terms of environmental sustainability to support local agriculture, as well as more sustainable for the local economy. So make sure you check out the Burrow Family Farms Facebook page. There's such a good example of sustainable farming. Here you can see a picture of one of their chicken tractors moving through their pastures. Just phenomenal example of what sustainable. So another great example of a pig farm doing things really sustainably out of Australia. Would love to visit Australia and see them in person, but Ball State probably won't pay for that. Okay, so we're going to compare conventional to non-conventional. So conventional pigs are fed grain, corn, and soybeans, and it takes approximately 500 pounds of grain to feed one pig. Yet these are not what pigs typically eat. They prefer grass, bushes, tree leaves, vegetables, fruits, nuts, meat, um, roots, and grubs. Due to overcrowding, intensively farmed pigs require more pesticides and antibiotics to keep them healthy. Each pig produces about 9 pounds of manure per day, which ends up in giant pits, which can be a pollutant for air and groundwater if not managed properly. Pigs are transported thousands of miles to slaughterhouses, butcheries, freezers, and grocery stores, thus consuming tons of fossil fuel. 1 million pigs die en route to slaughter every year. Versus pastured pigs. They raise pigs in open pasture and on a varied diet. As a result, the pigs are healthier, the meat tastes better, and there are little to zero effect on the environment. Oh, I should have added in. There's a new farm that just opened in Northern California that ships nationwide. They just launched their website and they're a pasture-raised pig operation, and they're called oh, what is it? I'll provide the link. Um, I always post all of the video links after I post the lecture file, so I'll post a link to their website. It's pretty awesome. So pigs roam in pasture where they eat grass, herbs, acorns, and roots, and they're also given food scraps from local farms, such as smashed avocados, tortillas, apples. We're helping to reduce food waste this way, much like the farm that we saw in the food video in lab last week. That fed buffet scraps from Vegas. Piglets have plenty of room to roam around, which keeps them healthy and reduces the risk of disease, and the ranch does not add any hormones. They have mud baths to cool off, shelter during the winter, and a maternity ward. Many of these ranches raise heritage pigs, thus preserving some of the rare breeds that are in danger of extinction. So, free range beef. A double-blind taste test shows that consumers cannot taste the difference between grass-fed and grain-fed beef. I was actually a part of one of these in one of my classes in undergrad, and at that point in time, I was like a super opinionated beef kid. I grew up on a beef cattle ranch. I just thought I knew everything. I was a total little shit. And I remember walking into class and he's like, I'm gonna feed you two types of beef today and you're gonna fill out a survey. And I was like, oh well, I'm gonna know which one's grain fed. Well, it turns out that I liked them both. So joke's on me. So let's watch a little bit about that. So the ultimate free range animals, if you really want to support, if you eat meat and you really want to support the well-being and natural feeding of an animal prior to consumption, the most free range, healthy version of meat that you can get is from hunting. Deer are a great way to feed your family. Elk are extremely good to eat. Moose, really great to eat. Bear, delicious. Turkeys, quail, ducks. Ducks, my favorite. Alligator literally tastes like chewy chicken. Um, Fish, it's all covered by permitting. Each species has a season in which they can be hunted. Um, And hunting actually permits conservation of these animals because they only give out a certain number of tags, and the money that they get from the tags helps cover the cost of breeding and counting and ensuring that there are enough of these animals to continue the species. So when you're hunting, you're actually investing in conservation. And I know it doesn't feel like it would, but it's also a wonderful way to feed your family at a very inexpensive cost. You are required to have a hunting license, usually associated with a gun safety class. I personally think that anyone who owns a gun should have a gun safety class. I've grown up shooting and hunting with my family, and if you don't know how to use a gun, you should not have one. That's just a safety thing, but that doesn't mean that you should be afraid and never go near one. It just means that you might have come from a family that didn't expose you to them. And so a healthy way to explore the possibility of hunting would be to take a gun safety class, and they also offer hunter safety courses, and you can make friends and go out with people who know what they're doing, can teach you the ropes and how to do this safely. Tags are sold based on animal counts. Hunting is basically used to control wild populations, both for their conservation or if they're out of control. So for example, deer are extremely overpopulated because they don't have a lot of natural predators compared to what they used to. So that's why you see them all over the roads. They've become a huge traffic problem. Alligators are actually a great example of a species that was borderline extinct in the 70s, and then the hunting conservation program brought them back so well that they're actually overpopulated now in the Gulf Coast and along Florida, for example. So we're going to move into the philosophy of sustainable agriculture, providing multiple systems on one farm. And a really good example of this is Polyface Farm, which is based on Joel Salatin. He says that no farm should have a single dimension, meaning you should have multiple enterprises to cover anything that goes south that year. Maybe you lose a bunch of livestock to predators or the market's down. You won't be negatively impacted by that if you're not a single dimension farm because you'll have other enterprises to help cover you. He has a multifaceted operation where each production segment assists in another. So in lab this week, we're actually going to watch Joel Salatin discuss his book, Folks, This Ain't Normal, which is really kind of an expansion of the video you just saw. So I will see you on Wednesday and get excited because Joel's pretty funny. He's kind of a loon. But he's very entertaining, and his principles are spot on for agriculture sustainability. And I really can't tell you enough how much I recommend his books. They're super inexpensive. They're like $5 a piece. You can buy them used on Amazon for even cheaper. He's got like 5 or 6 of them. Honestly, any of them is a good purchase. Like if you only end up reading one, it's worth it. Highly, highly, highly recommend them. So that's it. That's all for today. I will see y'all on Wednesday. Bye.